Art is, to me, a universal part of self-expression that human beings have, just like music and other things. And I think it's there within all people. The story behind the pieces is very important because that connects the human to the human. And I think there's so many millions and millions of levels of human expression through art, from the great masters down to just the scribbles of the petroglyphs, for example. They're all important, and it's all that human being behind it that's making it important.
South Carolina artist and Winthrop alumna Nancy Thomas Wofford reconnected to her classical art roots and set up a Michelangelo cast in her Greenville studio.
I think that the cast is a fundamental beginning to learning how to observe the natural world around you. And the art student in that process is more aware of how to translate the natural world into the practice of drawing. The human mind has more capability than we realize. So in trying to tackle a difficult task like this exercise, you do get a sense of accomplishment and encouragement to go further. It automatically improves draftsmanship, and that improvement in draftsmanship will stay with you technically for the rest of your life.
Nancy invited the ONeil family to do a cast drawing exercise with her.
One line changes the entire drawing, and all the relationships change, and that's why we have to correct so many times.
Where it's really helping me is, it goes so far down the abstract wormhole, even though I layer a lot of realism and I've got a classical background. I haven't done a cast drawing since, 30 years. So getting to go back to the basics in the classical realm, what it really helps me is with perspective from looking at one point and how things can change.
What our instructor always told us we need to do, come in and take the first minute and just look at your cast drawing with a fresh eye, and that is when you capture so many of the things that you didn't see when you left it the day before.
No matter the medium or genre of art you fancy, cast drawing is often considered a must-have experience to unlock an artist's potential. Jimmy ONeil echoes the sentiment.
I am an artist and I'm pushing the boundaries of paint. I developed a paint that is a mirrored paint about 20 years ago, and have still been pushing different ways of making that a lens, because since I'm now working with a camera embedded in a painting and wanting the viewer to see themselves as that painting, perspective becomes important. It's just good to get your chops up again, and do something that's completely out of the realm or unexercised space that I've been in. And also getting to work with somebody like Nancy, who's amazing, I'm in awe of what she does.
When I take a measure, horizontally across the tip of the whole thing, you've got all of your basic critical horizontals and verticals matching up really beautifully. Cast drawing is a setup in the studio situation where you would be using a cast, a white plaster cast of usually a famous Greek or Roman figure, and it's placed on a pedestal, and you have your drawing, your easel and your drawing paper next to it, and there's a process that you go through to align that piece with your paper and use your charcoal to replicate that. And it requires a tremendous amount of observation, correcting, going back and remeasuring, and your goal is to get an exact replica.
The ONeil kids teamed up to draw the cast, with a little help from Nancy, of course.
I feel like this was a very powerful experience for my sister and I as friends and as artists. We got to work together with Nancy to create this piece, and we learned so much because I never even used a plumb line before, and now I'm Like, that's all you need.
Even without traditional art training, the ONeil kids took a lot away from this experience.
I learned so much from this process because Nancy, she taught us how to be active in our learning and go back and forth from being away from the piece and towards the piece. So it's very much an active process with the teacher.
I'm going to take a look at it through your rectangle.
I think when you learn not only the technical aspect of your exercise and what you're trying to accomplish, but as you work this form, this particular figure, you start becoming emotionally involved in that form, and then historically, you begin to think about that character in history. So it enriches your art history as well.
Nancy says that during the Renaissance, the scholars realized that the classical Greeks had come to a deep understanding of the nature of beauty through figurative art. Therefore, beauty was in the antique for them. Art students had to master the antique before being allowed to draw from the life.
As time progressed, certain, let's call them famous characters in Greek and Roman history, were preferred by the artists. And so they became the standards that were used over and over again through the centuries in Europe as the atelier and as the classical instruction progressed. So I think that Belvedere torso that Michelangelo so adored would be a good example of that, the Venus de Milo, others that we see repeated over and over again. And they were beautiful, and they were learning tools for how to represent beauty and perfection of the form. Michelangelo is probably my favorite of artists and has been since art school days. But I think the dying slave, or dying captive as it's sometimes called, represents a condition in humanity and has great emotion to it. And I wanted to have an opportunity to try to learn how he did that, to capture his genius as an artist as he was trying to give us an emotion at that time.
Emotion is ever present, from the original Renaissance artist's feelings to the student executing a cast drawing and sharing a piece of themselves in the replica.
I think the Venus cast for me is probably my most important piece because it was my second cast drawing, but it was done at a time that my father was leaving us, and I had great pleasure in working on that piece. So I think it imbues a kind of emotion in the work itself that was not in the plaster model, and expressed some emotional feelings that I had at the time.
Can you feel the emotion?